In this lesson, we're going to be learning the Hiphil and its imperative and infinitive construct form. Let's do a quick review. We've learned the Hiphil imperfect. In the Hiphil imperfect, we learned that the hey prefix, usually characteristic of a Hiphil, drops out and is replaced by a prefix letter. And a key characteristic of the Hiphil in its prefix form is the patach beneath the prefix letter, followed by a sheva beneath the first radical letter. This is incredibly important, and if you haven't memorized this rule yet, please memorize it right now. Hiphil in its imperatival form is a little bit unique. When we're learning the call imperative form, we've learned that the call imperative lacks a prefix letter. Essentially, the imperative is a shortened form of the imperfect. That rule does not apply to the Hiphil imperatival form. This is because the Hiphil in its imperatival form actually has a hey prefix. This makes things quite complicated, and you have to pay careful attention, because when you see a verb with the hey prefix, your first gut reaction at this point should be it's a Hiphil. Well, if that's the case, and it's usually the case, you're going to think that it's a Hiphil kata or perfect form that has a hey prefix. But the vowel point beneath a Hiphil perfect or kata form is the hirek. Remember that it sounds like Hiphil. The hey with the hirek is characteristics of that. However, when we look at the imperatival form, what you'll see is that there's a hey prefix with the patach sheva vowel sequence that we've learned. So that's going to be the key characteristics with the Hiphil imperative. There's going to be a hey prefix letter, but the vowel pointing beneath the prefix letter in the first radical letter retains the imperfect form. That is a patach sheva sequence. So let's look at this. We have the verb lavash, to clothe, and lavash in its Hiphil imperative, second masculine singular form, is halbesh. There are a few things to note here, right? Of course, the hey prefix, and once you note the hey prefix, look down to the vowel pointing. You see that it is a patach beneath the hey, followed by a sheva under the first radical letter. These two things will point you to the fact that it must be a Hiphil, and it's specifically a Hiphil imperative. There's one other change that we're going to note in the masculine singular imperatival form. We learned that in the imperfect, usually, almost always, there's going to be the hirek yod vowel point between the second and third radical letter. Well, if you thought that vowel point would be retained in the imperative, it has actually changed. Now, instead of the hirek yod, you have a tzere vowel beneath the second radical letter. So, lavash in its second masculine singular imperative form is halbesh. All the other forms, whether that be masculine plural, feminine singular, or feminine plural, you're going to see that the general rule of look at the hey prefix with the patach beneath it and followed by a sheva under the first radical letter applies. One thing to note about the Hiphil infinitive construct is that, first of all, the form differs from the Hiphil imperative second masculine singular. Some of you might say, well, what's the point? What's important about that? Well, in the call, if you remember, the call imperative second masculine singular form was identical to the call infinitive construct form. I'll say that again. In the call, the imperative second masculine singular form is identical with the infinitive construct. So it was less memorization for you. However, now that we're learning the Hiphil imperative versus the infinitive construct, it's important to note that they are not identical. So you have to pay attention to the feature which distinguishes them. And the key difference between the Hiphil imperative second masculine singular form and the Hiphil infinitive construct form is the vowel point beneath the second radical letter. Here, we've learned that in the imperative, it's a tzere, whereas in the infinitive construct, it's the hirek yod, the characteristic hirek yod of Hiphils. And of course, sometimes there could be a lamed that helps you know that you're dealing with infinitives, because remember, whenever there's a lamed prefix to a verb, you're going to say immediately that that's an infinitive construct. Well, that rule is not absolute. Sometimes there could be alignment, sometimes there isn't. But remember, pay attention to the hey prefix with the patach, sheva beneath the first radical letter, and what will distinguish between the imperative and infinitive construct is the vowel under the second radical letter.